Finance Committee in the Nauset Room of Town Hall at 5:30. I think the first thing I'd like to do is have each of us introduce ourselves to our guests. Peter, want to start down at your end,
Peter
please?
O'Mara.
Dick Burdick.
Ed Mahoney.
Chris Kanega.
Elaine Baird.
Alice Thomason.
David Abel.
Tony Pearl.
And I'd like to
John
welcome our guests of, oh, and John, yes, I'm so sorry.
John's up there.
And John Cooper. And I'd like to welcome our guest, Scott Walker, Treasurer, and Darren Tangeman, who's our Finance Director. Is there anyone online for public comment?
No hands raised.
And I don't see anyone in the room. So I have a comment I'd like to make right off the bat, which is on our agenda tonight. The first thing we're going to be doing is discussing debt service as it relates to wastewater, firehouse, and the other projects that the town has been working on. For me, the bottom line and why we're doing this is to see just how much debt we do have in fiscal '26 and what that is costing us. What will happen if we add another $60 million to that debt? What will that add to each taxpayer, or how much, bottom line, will it add per $1 million of assessed value? With that figure, then we can start looking at that, how it impacts our future capital projects, as in libraries, schools, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of want to set the parameters of what these gentlemen are doing and talking with us tonight. So, and I think, Alice, you also had a prepared comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to read a comment that I made that I think is germane to the topics on our agenda today. My interest in joining the Finance Committee was an attempt to better understand the connection of the town's financial planning with that of the Planning Board, on which I sat for nearly 6 years. It was during that time that the 2026 Orleans Comprehensive Plan was developed, which will go to the voters this spring. The plan is a roadmap to guide growth, resource protection, and investment in our town. Central to that plan is a recognition that, quote, Orleans must remain affordable and livable for year-round residents, workers, families, and older adults, unquote. The plan also acknowledges the need to build a diverse community and protect long-term affordability. We all acknowledge the myriad needs and desires of the year-round and seasonal community. My worry is that without comprehensive, long-range financial planning, we may move further from the goal of affordability and inadvertently leave behind the families and younger generation who wish to make or keep Orleans their home. My feeling about using the EQV to justify taking on increasing expenses and debt doesn't work for me. It might work for the Commonwealth to determine state aid and grant awards, but for us and other resort towns, it's a double-edged sword. I think some of this is acknowledged in the seasonal community designation policy that supports housing initiatives. It acknowledges the challenges for seasonal communities continually being bought up by more wealthy non-residents. Regarding debt limits, the EQVs reflect high property wealth. Expanding borrowing capacity doesn't necessarily align with the year-round community's ability to service that debt. The situation is so dire that many Cape communities are responding with the RTE, another tool that appears to help counteract what appears to be a lopsided way of dealing with needs and debt. Doing the long-range planning that we have been asking for, forecasting the taxpayers' responsibility for increasing costs, is more critical now than ever. Families need to do this with their household budgets, making hard choices, particularly now. As we contemplate what we want and what we need and set policy and practice, I ask that we are always mindful of the 32% of owner households in Orleans who are noted by the Cape Cod Commission last April as housing cost burdened. Assist these households as we are able and ensure that the number doesn't grow. Thank you, colleagues and neighbors.
Thank you. Thanks, Alice. I'd like to make one other comment, is that we will be welcoming sometime after 6 o'clock a prospective new member of the Orleans Finance Committee, a gentleman by the name of Craig Oliveira, a young person. Anyway, so Scott, you're up.
Thank you. I've never presented from here. Can you hear me all right? Does that work okay?
The microphone closer to you, please.
I don't want to be too loud. Okay, let's do that. So Alice makes some great points. Nick, you hit on them in a couple of graphics that you sent out earlier, and they mirror what was discussed 4 years ago when I met with the Orleans Citizen Forum. Capacity, what can the town, what is the capacity of the town to do this or take this on? Which is quite different from the question of affordability. That's a definition that we've grappled with for many years. What is affordable?
Want to speak right into your microphone so the people at home can hear you?
To try and determine what is affordable for the town of Orleans and for the residents. This continues to be a conundrum, trying to figure out what is affordable. The state level has one idea, someone else has another, the person on the street has a third one. Yeah, absolutely. That presents a difficulty for all of us. We'll touch on that as we get to the firehouse issue, obviously. That tends to skew affordability clearly in a direction that's not favorable. We'll get there. So I'd like to talk about where the debt load of the town of Orleans is now, where we could expect it to be in 5 years at the end of this capital improvement plan. We're going to go over debt service. How do we pay for this borrowing? And what is our cost per year? And then we'll get into some nuts and bolts about cost of individual projects like the firehouse and like the sewer. Some of the financing involved with our sewer projects is quite different than anything else we've ever done. Things are more complex now, and I think kind of reviewing that with you will help you all. So we will, in fact, start with some of the state metrics, equalized valuation. And I will tell you that run up in values, here is our FY26 equalized value in Orleans. This number is updated by the state every 2 years. It is the total of all of the real estate in town if you sold all of it on the open market. This number increased, not in Orleans, nothing we did, but when we talk about the demand for the town, the second home community, that number increased 34%.
Wow.
Since the last time the equalized value was assigned. Tremendous jump. And yeah, the state uses a metric that says, oh, you can borrow up to 5% of that, which is $336 million.
Scott, just when was the last one? Just so we context.
So they come out with this new number in the middle of calendar year 2024. And they start using it as a metric for FY 25 and 26.
So when you said it went up 34%, what was the time period? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well,
Yes,
from,
okay, thank you.
yep. They'll come up with a new equalized value number this June that'll take place in the subsequent fiscal year, and it'll be what they'll use for the next 2 years afterward.
Let me just put in there, Scott, the last equalized value, David, that you just asked about was, what is this, 4 billion?
And Nick has it correct on his chart.
865?
Correct. No, yes, $4,865,120,300.
So it's gone from the, basically, 5 billion to almost 7 billion.
So that's a big jump.
Big jump.
Does that mean we should borrow right up to that limit of $336 million? No. It's a metric the state uses. At the bottom of the chart here, Orleans debt that's subject to the debt limit, $183 million. This is the number of everything we have approved for borrowing. By that I mean there is some $70 million in that number that we've not yet borrowed anything for, but we approved borrowing for it at a town meeting. We can and likely will borrow that money over the next 5 years. So that's the whole ball of wax right now for Orleans that we're on the hook for. Principal. This is a principal number. The Orleans remaining borrowing capacity, 152 million. Does it mean we have to use it all right now? Nope. As I told the Citizens Forum 4 years ago, if we did a $40 million firehouse, that was the number then, $40 million community center and a $40 million library, could the town afford it all? According to this, yes. Should they? Will the voters vote? Will they make the decision to give themselves a tax increase to support that type of spending? Don't know. How should we advise them
So,
where they should go with it?
can I ask a question here? So this is the actual total debt that we're talking about,
Total
and this
debt.
is the debt, the 5% is also in the Orleans policy
That is correct.
as a maximum.
That's correct.
Which is considered consistent.
So we are at 2.7% as it shows
Now,
here.
I think it's important to point out that when we say that we're going to borrow $60 million for a fire station, we are not going to write a check for $60 million. What we're saying is we're going to float debt that needs to be serviced to the level of $60 million.
We'll spend
So
$60
if
million
you-
over 30 years.
If you take $60 million and divide it by 6,200 homes, just to make a rough number, that's not the number that is going to hit people the next day with their taxes, okay?
No,
Okay.
we'll get to that.
Yeah, I just want to make that clear because, you know, I don't know about others, but sometimes I have a problem flip-flopping between absolute value of debt, debt service,
Yep.
interest paid, all that stuff. So let's be clear.
Just as a point of comparison, prior year's percentage of equalized value. Now, bear in mind, these are all in a fairly tight range, but what often happens in municipal finance is the denominator changes. The goalpost is always moved. As Elaine pointed out 2 years ago, this was 4-point-something billion. The goalpost is always moving in terms of assessments, in terms of equalized value. This kind of mirrors Nick's chart. It shows that we're staying within a range regardless of the goalpost moving. Our percentage of equalized value is moving. I show this merely to say, we're not at capacity, a danger zone, not saying that it's good. But yeah, we have to be mindful. We don't want to run all the way up to the top of the flagpole there.
Scott,
Yes.
are there any towns that approach or borrow to their, what is it called, equalized value limit in Massachusetts?
There likely are some, and I,
City of Quincy takes that award.
Really?
yeah, I don't know which ones do. I know that the Department of Revenue says, if you get close to your 5% limit, you can petition the state, and they'll give you another 5. Which to me is like strange.
Print the money.
Yes.
Scott, thank you for referencing the taxpayer and the tax impact, right? So, you know, I'd like you to just go back on that a little bit because that is part of what we've been searching for, right? As we take on this debt. And then I have to be mindful of my concern of the 32% of our homeowners, year-round homeowners, that have been identified as being housing burdened, okay?
Yep.
And I want to be sure people who are listening to this broadcast understand generally, if you wouldn't mind, what equalized value means, how that is set, generally.
Yeah, generally, it's set as if, my analogy is the one that I think people can understand the most. It's not a tax assessment like Brad does, which might be 92% of street value. It's the only metric, and why do they not use that? I don't know. But it's the only metric where they say, if you sold every property in town, you're going to get fair market value. Add that up. That's equalized value. This is the only realm in the municipal finance where they use such a number.
Yes, and
But
if that's,
you sold everything, the market would move down.
Well, that's beside the point. They're just trying to establish a value.
Okay.
and Scott, am I correct in saying that the Commonwealth establishes that value
Yes, they do.
for their own purposes of equalization across communities for many other fiscal activities, such as state funding awards and grant awards? Am I correct about that, or no?
I don't know if it's used for anything other than this metric. I do not know.
But
They assign equalized value for every community, all 351 of them in the Commonwealth. It's not
Correct.
something Orleans does.
correct.
They'll come to us and say, this is your number for this year.
Yes, but I think I want to just be sure to stress the point of the difference that the seasonal communities have been feeling as a result of this type of policy. And therefore, in my estimation, they have reacted by having opportunities for the RTE, for example, opportunities for seasonal communities designations to try to counterbalance what my editorial, the inequities inherent in this.
I'm not going to say necessarily it's a smart way to do things, or that it's not a smart way, but it's what they came up with.
Correct. Thank you.
One shoe size doesn't fit all. We will move on to the capital improvements project. I want to go over a few examples here with you. I'm going to start with the Beaches Enterprise Fund, so you understand a little bit more about timing. When you see an item on the CIP, when does it come into play for the town? So let's look at the bottom item here, Nauset Beach Administration Building. A project is going to get approved here. This $350,000 is probably a planning piece, and it'll be approved this spring in '26. And so in FY '27, we would borrow this on a short-term basis for 1-year note. 1 year later, we would then borrow the $3.5 million for the construction of the project as a 1-year note. Both of these together, $3,850,000, we would then borrow again as a 1-year note in FY '29. It's probably a 2-year project. We'd probably borrow it again for a 1-year note in FY '30. Then when the project is completed, we would bond it, meaning pay it off over 20 or 30 years, permanent financing, that's called, with the first debt service, which is principal and interest payment, then being due the following year in FY '31. So on a chart that I will show you later, I will show the cost of this coming on to the taxpayer in FY '31. Consequently, this Gavigan Cottages, I've seen this on the CIP for 3-4 years running now. Similarly, we would borrow $100,000 here for 1 year, then here we'd borrow another $250,000 for a year, then here we'd borrow $2.5 million on a 1-year note. This is probably a 2-year build. It would be completed in FY '32, which is not on the chart, with the first debt service payment being due the next year, FY '33. Now, I show you this for you to become familiar with the idea that because it appears here on the plan doesn't mean that's when the cost to us is going to occur, as an example. The sewers work similarly. Let's say water, sewer, debt exclusions. We have this Phase 4 implementation here. These work a little differently. These two planning pieces, 2.9 and 5.3, work like what we just saw previously. We would borrow them for a year at a time until the construction is complete on the project. Now, the construction piece is something that we get from the state in what is known as a state revolving fund loan. It works differently than all other debt. We pay money up front to a variety of contractors to put pipes in the ground, in essence. And after we've spent $1 million or $2 million, we send those paid bills to the state, and they reimburse us for that out-of-pocket money. This continues over the 2 or 3 year process of constructing the project. And then when that's all done, the state comes in and says, okay, now you got to pay us back for all that money we fronted you. And that's where this project then gets bonded for a 0% interest rate, which is as good as it gets. These two planning pieces don't qualify for 0% interest rate. They get bonded, if you will, at market rates. This gets bonded at a 0% interest rate through the Mass Clean Water Trust. So you sort of have a hybrid on one project. Some of it has interest, some does not. But all of it gets repaid over a 30-year period. And again, with a 2-year build, it's not likely this would be completed till FY '31. If it were bonded then, first debt service would be FY '32. It's beyond this 5-year window we're looking at now. Yes, Ed?
Scott, for the short-term borrowing pieces, like the 2.95 million for the sewer.
Yep.
We borrowed that in year one.
Yep.
Did we pay debt service on that amount, or does it?
Interest only.
Interest only?
Interest only.
Okay, so interest only, but it is paid currently. It's not deferred.
It's paid at the end of 12 months. So
At the
we
end of
borrow
12
it
months.
today, 12 months from now, in the next
Okay.
fiscal year.
So the short-term borrowings, interest only, payable annually.
Correct.
At the end of the 12th month.
Correct.
Great.
And then the term is we roll it over. We re-roll it for another year.
Great. And then when you do the final bonding, you capitalize those and roll it into the total borrowing.
Correct.
Not for sewers because it's, you got the zero interest piece. But, for example, the fire station, the 4.5 million we approved for the planning, we can roll that into the 59 million plus and actually go out and borrow 63 or 64 million dollars.
Correct. We would borrow it as one piece
One big piece, yes. So you can capitalize expenses like planning and design.
and
into the
roll them
final
into.
bond.
Just Scott, before you move that, just so everyone knows that 2.9 million has been revised down to 2.7, just in the final budget that'll be given to them.
Tony?
Scott, what is the interest rate? You said some of it's zero and some of it's market rate. What is the market rate? How do you define the market rate? Is it
It's-
something over LIBOR or what?
It won't be any different. Let's say these planning costs, we had to borrow them the same year we were going to borrow for the Rock Harbor Commercial Wharf
Yep.
or the fire station. There's no different interest rate because it's a sewer project, whatever the going market rate is at the time. And we use estimates to try and peg what we think that will be in 3 years,
And-
4 years.
But the interest rate we pay for this year is what, how is the market rate defined?
Well, it's fixed if you're borrowing short-term, it's fixed for 1 year from a bidder in the marketplace that's willing us to pay us the least amount of interest for our debt. Or
So, for instance, municipal bonds now for 1 year are going at what rate?
3.5
Okay.
for that type of borrowing. So if someone comes in and says, I'll buy that debt for 2.9%,
You do it,
the
yeah.
next guy is the bidder, says, I'll buy it for 2.8. Winning bidder is the low bidder. Low is the high bidder. The guy who's the lowest interest, gives us the lowest cost, is the high bidder.
For the purpose of just educating the public on this too, we are a AAA bond, obviously rated municipality. And so if we move to I'm not trying to patronize anybody's intelligence, but if, for instance, we exceeded what S&P felt we should take on in debt, and they dropped us to a AA, that type of debt would cost us more money, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
Darren, I looked this stuff up
Yeah.
because I was interested. I found that the difference in borrowing costs between AAA and AA ranges from 3% to 12, but very
Yeah, so-
small,
so
very
I-
small difference.
An example might be the
It's not
library,
1%.
right? The library's currently a $37 million project. If we drop to a AA on that specific project today, it would be probably around $1 million and a half more in borrowing costs.
Interest rate.
If we would drop to a AA, yeah. So just, that's a big difference, I mean, for taxpayers. So we do want to maintain our AAA bond rating, and so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, you can equate on a long-term municipal bond, if a AAA rated entity comes out and issues a bond at 4.5%, you would see a AA rated entity borrowing at about 4.65%. It's about 1/8% to 1/4% difference for a rating drop. But that equates to, over the life of the loan, a lot of cabbage.
Yeah.
Yes.
So interest rate-wise, it's not a huge deviation, 1/8 point, maybe 1/4, but over the life of the loan, it adds up. And only on new borrowing. What we have existing, those interest rates do not change. Those are fixed rates.
I just wanted to make sure I understood, on the sewer, so there's did you say the planning portion gets bonded at a 30-year separate from, so the construction's zero, the planning and engineering
Yeah.
is on a
So those would be two separate loans.
Okay.
If you will. Those can't be commingled like planning for the firehouse into one large loan. They have to be separate.
Did I misunderstand? I thought the sewer borrowing was provided by the state at 0%. Is that wrong?
That's correct, for the construction part of the project.
see.
Is the engineering.
Planning and engineering costs do not qualify for the 0% financing.
I see.
So this is part of the level of complexity that sewer debt has brought to us. To take the explanation one step further, so for the construction piece, it's 0% financing. We also receive a 25% subsidy from the Cape and Islands Clean Water Trust. So if your debt service is $1 million a year, with that subsidy, it's now $750,000. Because they're going to subsidize a portion of it for us. And on top of that, we may have a betterment structure that dictates that the persons hooked up to the sewer are going to pay 20% of that cost as a betterment. So we're going to reduce the $750,000 by 20%, which is another $150,000, I believe. So when you put a number like that on a chart and someone sees it, they look at it and say, that doesn't make any sense. You're borrowing X amount of money, but your debt service is so low, and it always constantly requires this sort of an explanation.
So could you give us an idea of what the percentage of the debt is construction cost and the percentage that is engineering and?
Depends on the phase.
On the chart.
On the chart.
Depends on which phase of the sewer it is.
Understand.
So let's move to this. This is our current debt service structure. I'll start with some terminology over here. You have the terminology non-exempt. Here you have excluded. What's the difference between the two? There isn't any. For some reason, municipal finance has decided to use two terms that mean and function exactly the same. They mean the same thing. It's like saying, well, this is indigo, that's blue. It kind of means the same, it does mean the same thing. These are non-exempt, meaning they are not exempt from Proposition 2.5. Excluded means they are excluded from Proposition 2.5. Those both mean the same thing. CPA debt and water debt are what they call self-supporting. They have a revenue stream that pays all of these costs each year. It doesn't come from the tax base. The items that do come from the tax base are the debt exclusions, those that are excluded from Proposition 2.5, meaning we can raise the tax levy more than 2.5% to pay for these items because the voters voted to do so. I will give myself a tax increase to pay for these projects, but only these projects. You can't use the money to pay the electric light bill, fix a pothole, or pay police salaries, only for the project in question. Now, we often hear a discussion of debt drop-off. I want to show you graphically just a little piece of that. So for our general fund debt, things that are not wastewater, we've been a little over $4 million in FY25, 4.2 million almost in 26, almost 4.1 million in 27, and then 28. Ooh, she's dropped $900,000. That's an example of what they call debt drop-off, where it decreases. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to show you that I'm going to fill that up and bring it back up to the $4 million level. But there is an example, and this is what we are going to be utilizing over a 10-year horizon for planning purposes, is finding the areas where there is the debt drop-off and scheduling projects around that. Sewer debt came on here. Back in FY '22, we had very little. You can see that it goes every 2 years, we pick up $1 million more. And further down, I'm going to show you that occurring again. This is our true number in '25. This is our true number in '26. This will be our true number in '27. Our debt service for the whole town, about $70,000 more than it was the prior year. Now, when I give this to the budgeting folks, they take the number and they divvy it up. They'll take $326,000 out of here and charge it to the Beaches Enterprise Fund, where it's paid 100% from beach-related revenues, not your taxes. They'll take $44,000 of that out of there and charge it to the Transfer Station Enterprise Fund, where they pay it out of their revenues, and it doesn't come out of your taxes. And likewise with sewer, we have, as you know, $1.5 million that comes out of the short-term rental tax to subsidize sewer operations until we get to the point someday where the sewer will eventually act like the water service does. They'll have sufficient revenues coming in to cover all of their costs. In the early years of this project, we're not there yet. So there is taxpayer subsidy on the wastewater side of things, or sewers. Wastewater is the nice name for it. I'm going to go down a page, and what these items are in our previous equalized value equation, these are all the projects we haven't yet permanently borrowed any money for. And I'm going to layer them into this same chart up above, and we can see what will occur. Now, this debt drop-off here, I'm going to fill that with, in FY '28, $307,000 per year for our solar project that was approved last spring, $585,000 per year for the Rock Harbor Commercial Wharf, that's a $9 million borrow, and $128,000 a year for the Town Cove Bulkhead that was approved last spring. So that brings what would have been $3.1 million in FY '28 up to $4.1. And again, for general obligation debt, we're fairly flat going on out. It's been managed fairly well. What we're also going to add to this chart on the last three items are sewer related. Here are the planning costs for phase 3. You may recall our discussion of planning costs. These will be at market rate of interest. It'll be $220,000 per year. And the phase 3 construction costs that are the 0% financing. Now from this, I've subtracted the 25% Cape and Island subsidy. So we have basically $1.2 million being added to the sewer project in FY '30. That brings that number up to $4.4 million. It was $3.2 million previously. So what I want to show here that our general fund debt for our variety of municipal purposes remains fairly flat over this period of time, but sewer is the real driver. We went from 2.6 million here, we added another million 2 years later in FY '27. In FY '30, another 1.2 million. And so one could speculate, and someone asked the question, that every 2 or 3 years, when another $40 million sewer piece comes along, we can expect to see about $1.2 million added to the debt service. And as time goes on, not all of it will be paid by the taxpayers. We'll have revenues coming in to offset that. Now, Rich Waldo is working on a program with a vendor now called Water North that will, in fact, take every project they're going to do for the sewer from now to 2025 and chart this all out with betterments in there, with Cape and Islands subsidies. I don't have the time to do it in the last 3 days to put that out, but it's coming. And we'll have a strong, robust program that'll allow us to see that.
Scott, how long can you borrow for sewer projects? Can you go out beyond 30 years?
Oh, right now it's 30.
30 is the
That's
max?
Statutory limit, again, is what they
Is that-
require.
That's a statutory limit on municipal?
On most brick and mortar construction projects, something like a dredging project that could be wiped out in a good winter storm, they give you 5 years.
I was hoping the economic life might be 30, 45, 50 years, maybe you could match it.
Fire trucks, fire apparatus, 10 years. We don't want to borrow beyond that for a new fire truck. What happens if they trade it in 10 years and you decided to borrow for 20?
Yeah.
We don't want to do that. We want to avoid that sort of a thing. But the driver and the important thing is the sewer project as it comes every couple of years. Now, when we talk about cost to taxpayers, taking on $1.2 million additional sewer cost here in FY '30 costs the average taxpayer, and the average taxpayer next year is $1.467 million. Costs the average taxpayer $200 over that 2-year period prior to that debt going on, which to me is $100 a year. You could say the sewer is costing every resident, on average, about $100 a year every time a new phase goes on. This phase is a $44 million project. So in round numbers, that's going to cost, do it again in 2 years, another $200 on your tax bill. So it's a metric. It has a cost. You know, I like to say it's a good thing we're not paying interest on it because it would be a lot more. But that doesn't carry a lot of weight when someone's tax bill goes up $200. Yes.
To that point, since you brought it up, I had 2 questions. With the 0%, is that on a 20-year or 30-year payback?
That's on a 30-year.
Okay.
If we're not paying interest, why would we ever pay it off early?
Oh, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
So I know.
Yeah, it's a 30-year
And
amortization,
how
yes.
long do we expect that to last? In other words, being available.
Well, that's a good point, and that's part of some of what I wanted to discuss. Do we know, and we don't yet, when we talk about betterments, where we're charging persons who connect to the sewer a certain portion of the cost, what will the betterments be in the future? The Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners decided for Phase 1 and 2 what they would be, but they haven't decided beyond that. What will they be in the future? Don't know. People said, is this kind of money going to dry up at the federal level? When Doge came along, with a lot of questions, is this going to end? I think it's state money, but is there some that trickles down? Hard to predict. I don't know. Will the Cape and Islands Clean Water Trust subsidy exist
That's my next question.
to 2065? Kevin Galligan might have a better feel. I don't know.
You will be here to tell us.
Okay.
So there's often a lot of variables. We can only go by what we know. We would probably make predictions in all 3 of those realms, assuming they were going to exist. The betterments were 20% on the first phase of the system. They might stay there for phases 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They might not. They might be higher. They might be lower. Again, sewer financing is difficult. A lot of variables to be considered. So I'm going to move on here. Now what I'm going to do is there are 11 items on the capital improvement plan that's circulating right now. Here they all are. These are the ones that are $1.5 million or more that could conceivably be approved. There are only 4 of these that could hit your taxes between now and FY '31 for some of the reasons I've discussed based on timing. There are just 4, so I'm going to layer them in to our existing debt service. And this is my next chart. We have a water treatment plant air system debt service beginning in FY '30 at $307,000 per year. But again, water debt does not affect your tax rate. It's paid out of water revenues. These next three will. Nauset Beach admin, I predict the debt service will begin in FY '30. It'll be $236,000 a year out here, in this line. Depot Square renovation, debt service in FY '31, out in this neighborhood also. And the fire station design and construction, which we're now using a 59-point-something million dollar figure. Now, when we were talking about a $45 million firehouse, the debt service per year was 2.6 million. Now it's 3.6, and we're going to add that out here on the long end. So all of a sudden, our $4 million per year general fund debt balloons to this number. That's a huge increase. And we're going to get into the cost per household shortly. But that's fully integrated here for these 4 CIP projects that could hit within the next 5 years. And commensurately, the debt service is a little flat. It actually goes down a year in '29. Then for 30 and 31, it's going to go up appreciably. The question for beyond FY '31 becomes, how do we mitigate and what kind of strategies might we employ to, one idea that comes to my head is, does every phase of the sewer project have to be every 2 years? Could it not be every 3 or every 4? And who makes that decision? That's at the top of my head. I certainly, I think anyone here would say no. Would it make sense to have the library come online the next year after the fire station? Probably not. I mean, that's too much, too soon. But someone else is going to make that decision. Yes.
I just ask a quick question. Just for the sake of clarity, when we refer to taxpayers, we're referring to property taxpayers. But when we say this isn't going to be on the taxpayers because it's water revenue, are there water revenue payers who aren't taxpayers? I mean, I just want to clarify the fact that however that money comes in, it's from the taxpayer, whether it's a check to the water, sewer.
So perhaps I correct the vernacular. It's not an item that raises your property tax bill.
Right.
I just want to add the betterments is the same thing, so.
Right.
And you're right, it's the definition of the terminology.
Definition of terminology. So FY '31 is the big year when I think conceivably the firehouse could come on if it occurs in a 2-year build. I'm told that there's a tenant on the property through July of 2027, that they would hope to start construction that fall. That 2 years takes me to the fall of 2029, which is FY '30. If it was completed then in FY '30, we would bond it, and the first debt service payment would be the next year, FY '31.
Scott, thank you so much for doing this. This is really instructive. I appreciate it, and I'm sure the others do too. Have you shared this kind of presentation with others, other groups?
Well, you guys are the first. There's this select board meeting next week where some of this data will appear there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking, sort of a raw thought here, but, it occurs to me that this is the kind of thing that would need to go to the Fire and Rescue Building Committee and the library trustees, and so people have a realistic understanding of the yes or no around their projects and their requests.
That's why we film it.
Well, but you and, I mean, we all know that doesn't work, right? I mean, how many people are watching us right now? Peggy can probably tell us.
Right up there.
Oh, okay, so that's not enough,
I don't disagree,
right?
Alice.
I mean, yeah, I know, I'm not picking this argument with you. I'm picking this with the whole apathetic group that's out there, because this is serious business, right? And we are ostensibly the board that tries to help, like you are, people understand the seriousness and the impact of this, so people aren't wringing their hands when it's too late.
I think the main gist of this final chart is that the sewer is the driver more so. Our general fund debt for everything else, we've tried to, hold that constant, but the sewer is almost on a schedule that says every 2 or 3 years, we're doing this.
Yeah.
And here comes another $1 million of debt service, and here comes another million and two more, and it's going to continue like that.
But,
Scott, is there any plan for a public hearing where you'd speak? I mean, it is incredibly informative and helpful, and people will react much better to the numbers that you're discussing on what it's going to cost them than the 60 million, 40
I
million.
mean, that's what the joint public hearings are for, the one that we had last week and the one we're going to be having next week.
Okay.
The one that's coming up is going to be including some of this debt service conversation along with because this is very much part of the operational budget.
Yep.
So it's there if people want to see it. And certainly, our job, this is our job, Finance Committee. This is the nuts and bolts of what we do.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
implicit, I think, in something that Scott is saying there, every 2 to 3 years as the sewer monies come on. I mean, elephant in the room, should that be maybe not 2 to 3, maybe it should be 3 or 4
Yes.
years to stretch out those payments so that we can start looking at something like a library, as Scott's saying. But let's let Scott, I'm babbling too much. Let's let Scott finish his
All right.
excellent
So-
presentation.
This chart will basically shows everything the town will have under their belt for borrowing conceivably over the next 5 years. If you take this number here, 14.2, and you subtract it from where we are going to be in FY '27, not an estimate, these are real numbers, this is what I'm going to sign checks for next year to pay. There's a difference there of $5,522,463. So for the average home in Orleans, which as I mentioned was 1.467 million, that $5.5 million equates to $1,050 per year increase in that person's taxes. That's for everything. I'm also going to break it out just for the firehouse. But I think that's an important number that's conceivable in that time. The average home in $1.4 million would see that. Now, don't forget, the denominator always goes up in all of this math. So the denominator here is the assessed value of all property in town. Safe to say in 5 years, it's gonna be higher than it is now. So that $1,000 a year tax number is likely to be lower, but let's just look at worst case. If the assessment stayed flat, we know they won't. But rather than add another layer of assumptions and try to figure out what the assessments will be in 5 years, let's just go with that. Now, as far as the firehouse itself goes, we have, Brad and I made up a nice program here, and we can do this for any project we would like. We're gonna borrow $59,625,000. It's gonna be at 4.5%. We're gonna borrow it over 30 years. And it's gonna tell me the debt service per year is this, which is what I put on a previous chart. We move it over here as new debt service, added to the current year's assessed value, and we get a new tax levy. And it calculates and tells us that the tax rate increase is 48 cents per thousand. So if you have $1 million home, that's $480 estimated tax impact. And here is your chart for the firehouse. Your average house is $1,467,000. That's going to run about $700 for that person. This is just the firehouse. Our estimate's at nearly $60 million of what it's going to be, and I have 10 copies here of this for those who want to take them with them, of this, for friends and neighbors that want to know. So $700 here is the firehouse. Another $300 in borrowings is that number I mentioned earlier, about another $1,000 a year in taxes for other miscellaneous projects. So the average home is looking at about $1,000 increase, assuming all these projects are approved and done. Now, capital improvement projects come and go. Maybe they won't get voted in, don't know. They're on there as a planning document. Let's put them in and just pretend they're all going to happen over the next 5 years. But there's only 4 of them could potentially, we'd have to make payments in the next 5 years. We can do this for any number of projects. This little calculator is fantastic. If we want to borrow
That's great.
30 million for a library, what's that going to cost us?
Chris has a question.
Yes.
Again, just for clarity, that's just the increase from the debt service.
Right, that's, yeah.
So
Yes.
I think people can expect similar increases from other purposes, whether it's personnel, other items in the budget other than the
The
debt
budget will
service.
go up.
Yeah.
Clearly, the budget will go up. We
I
have.
just wanted to make clear that everybody knows that that $1,000 is just the part allocable to debt service.
Interest and
on the
principal
budget,
payments
which is-
per year, right.
Yeah.
That the
15% or
individual
whatever the number
pays
is of the
toward
budget.
this,
Okay.
toward this $14 million figure.
Right,
Their average person's paying $1,000 toward that.
right.
It's a good thing that you raised that, because we go back to the introduction that Elaine made, why we're here and what we're talking about. Okay.
Here are those projected yearly principal and interest payments over those years in question. Here's what we believe the town budget could be as time goes on. Again, we've stayed for a number of years in a fairly straight range, and like Nick's chart earlier in the day shows that we've sort of kept pace with other metrics until the firehouse comes along. And then we're in a similar situation that we were 20 years ago in FY '20, when the police station and the DPW facility came on the tax base. $23 million was shocking. And as a tax collector, I was yelled at regularly on a daily basis and cursed out over and over. It was a horrible year. But
We're sorry.
that's what happens. And in FY '31, it's coming again.
You will still be here.
Yeah, so as a percentage of the budget, again, the denominator changes every year. The denominator changes every year when we do the mathematics. Obviously, if we were looking at FY '31's number using the denominator from FY '20, would blow us out of the water. But I think Nick's point with his chart, with a couple of these other ones, I think we're operating in a stable range. But if we get into a range where we're 19, 20% on a regular basis, I think the Standard & Poor's is probably going to have some issues with that. I think the library and the firehouse and maybe a campus project within a couple, 3 years of each other is too aggressive, my thought. Someone else might disagree.
Scott, I'll vote for a flak jacket for you in the budget if you wish.
Thank you, Tony.
If I can,
Additional questions?
Scott, if I can mention, just, go.
As you move out, there's some type of impact on assessed valuations in terms of a negative impact if that drops?
Something like the Great Recession of '08, '09. That is a possibility. So the answer I don't have for you is, let's say that happens, and it could be a combination of a tsunami, whatever economic events, and all of a sudden, our debt metrics at the state level exceed that 5%. Yeah, what happens? I don't know. Does one go to the state, as I mentioned, and apply for another 5%, which I'm told they grant? I don't know. It certainly would add a constraint that today we're not really taking into account when we see the assessed values drastically heading the other way. I mean, I don't think any of us can refute, we've seen prices go bananas for the last 3, 4, 5 years. Does it mean that quick we borrow right up to capacity? No, doesn't mean that. State says we could, but in terms of affordability, we still grasp with what is the affordable place for Orleans to be. One might have a feeling about another $1,000 a year on my taxes, but I'm getting a firehouse and I'm getting this. To one, it's worth it. To others, it's the backbreaker. And then everyone in between. How do you define affordability? This has been a constant difficulty for many years.
Scott, if, again, hate to beat this horse to death, but I do believe in the work of the Cape Cod Commission. And when we're looking at 32% of our households that are identified as being household burdened, and we're thinking about adding, you know, as Chris has pointed out, you know, this is not a standalone obligation, the debt piece. It's just it's a part of the mosaic of all of the costs
right.
that are going into our community, into our residents. And I guess, you know, the question for me is not so much, you know, can we handle what's affordability for the people who can afford it? It's like, what's affordability for the people who can't afford it? And we're saying, you know, again, we say we want to have a diverse community with younger people, more families, our school needs kids. How on earth, even if we build lower-cost housing, how on earth are they going to be able to live here and
So
stay
Alice,
here?
might I suggest that those questions that you're raising are things that we'll be talking about when we look at the specifics of the operational budget and the warrant articles?
I think we have to
No.
look at those in
Well,
conjunction
exactly,
with
but right
this.
now, we still want to be focusing on the impact of the debt on our taxes.
Right, but let's be sure we don't think of that as a standalone.
Right. John?
Scott, thank you for your diligent work. And I believe I heard you say earlier that when you look at our current situation, we are not in a danger zone. My question is, if you look at year 31, are you seeing us moving any closer to a danger zone, looking at the numbers that you're providing this evening?
Well, I think I have that here. In terms of, yeah, equalized value, I did not run that out. I can do that based on assumptions of where we're going to be. And I can tell you that, let's see. Yeah, I'll have to run that for you. I will tell you no. What I will tell you is that if we look at these 11 capital improvement projects, and people will look at the CIP and they say, "Josh, that's $200 million. We can't afford that." Well, the fact of the matter is, we're paying off about $5 million in debt principal every year. So over the next 5 years, we'll pay off $25 million. We also have $10 million from a project that's unspent that's going to come off. And when that occurs, we actually could take on this whole nut. Now, then we'd be in the 4% range. I did not do that calculation. I should do that. I know what the equalized value limit will be in 31, 32. I don't know that I had the debt total here. Yeah. Sorry, I missed that one. But I would say, are we going to be at the 5% limit? And the answer would be no. I know we can easily take on another 50, 60, $80 million. We have adequate capacity so that we're not over the limit or close to it, but I just don't have the number.
If I can, I think another metric that we can use that's pre-EQV, that we don't have to get to that point, is as a government, do we want to maintain like good borrowing, in terms of our AAA bond rating, right? From a best practice, 20% is generally around that percent that nationally that they, in terms of what S&P may see. So as we creep towards that, which we have in FY31, that's something to really consider. Like, do we borrow then, or do we? And there's going to be a lot of discussion with. I don't want to come out in a more detailed conversation, but with what Rich is doing in terms of trying to look at the sewer costs, years out. What we're doing with Bureau Veritas, which is our consultant for a 10-year CIP right now, will be looking at this as well and trying to determine whether or not that, how do we structure the debt to never go over that 20%. So I think, I say never. I mean, there's always emergencies. And so ultimately, and this gets to the point, what's affordable, the voters vote on what's affordable, right? And so We just need to inform them of what the impact of their decisions are.
Darren, the 20% you're referring to, that's 20% of the total operating budget
That percent up there.
of the budget?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure what it was 20% on.
Yeah, I might just say incidentally, some of this data you see on the DLS website, some of it is valid and accurate, these equalized value numbers you'll see. These percentage of budget figures are all quite a bit lower if we wanted to compare other communities. And even for Orleans, they're quite a bit lower on the DLS website because they use the revised budget at the end of the fiscal year, when likely more spending gets added to it and it's a higher denominator. Whereas what I take here is the budget that we're presenting in the spring at the town meeting, which is a lower figure. The revised budget at the end of the year is usually a larger one. So that causes that right-hand column to be lower. If you go to the state and look at it, and it's like, why does this not agree with what he said the other night? Just as a preemptive, just to let you know that.
Well, this is a great, I think we agree that probably for most of us, this is an illuminating presentation, and thank you for that. The other thing that I think I would take away from all this is that you can't model the entire economic situation of the town, because if we're talking about debt, and just the debt matrix is so complex, this goes up, the other goes down, and 5 years from now we have to go to the Oracle to tell us what the value will be and all those things. It's a lot of learning that we have to give, we have to provide, we have to try to provide to our fellow citizens. Because, if the rest of us who've been on this panel still have these questions after X number of years of asking them and hearing answers, it must be befuddling to many people who don't spend that much time to think about how the town works, So thank you for this. This is great.
I'll echo Nick's comments. Thank you very much. It is educational because I'm learning a lot every time I hear this. But I want to make a couple of comments, and maybe it could lead to further discussion another time. I think the sewer looms over all of this, at least financially, in my view, and I'm not expert at this. This is why this exchange really helps educate me as we go along. And I just played with numbers. I was provided the projected figures that the town has. And if you add it out over the full cost of the sewer projects, it comes out at $952 million. So we're just short of $1 billion. And that doesn't include any interest. It's just straight at a 4% escalator for the cost of the projects. It's not talking about debt. It's just that's the cost. But as Chris was saying earlier, and as I echoed, that cost is paid by the taxpayers. If you're paying $30,000 to hook up, it's the same cost to you. And so I was trying to get a sense on a macro level. What does this actually cost the town, meaning all of us, and what is its impact in terms of, can you build a library? Can you invest in housing? Can you rebuild a school 10 years from now, or whatever you have to try and do? And I understand, the denominator has gone up for a long time, but I've lived through 3 real estate crashes. I think pretty much all of us are the same age, if you remember them. I was in the business, so they were very acute at the time. And that does throw a monkey wrench into it, so you can't count on that. And besides that, just having increased values doesn't mean income rises. It just simply doesn't. It's not remotely close. So what you're doing is you're basically taking wealth to pay for this. It requires wealth. Income very often isn't going to be able to do it. So I'm not looking for an answer on this. I'm just, except for one question specifically, is that when I ran this out, I just used 20 years because I wasn't sure if you guys do 20 or 30. interest only forever, which is I think not something that's going to happen. I think we're going to pay interest eventually. And if you just spread it out over 20 years, you're hitting some really big numbers, and they go for a long time because now it's 30 years. It's even longer, but it overlaps. And so I'm just curious, we're looking at 5-year projection, and in that 5th year, it jumps. Where can we get, even just looking at sewer, what are those costs, and how do we project those out? Because you have so many phases, they layer over, as you're talking every 2 years, they layer over each other, and they become cumulatively much larger. And we're just at the very, very beginning of that. And that is what I think is something, I haven't seen anyone in the town grapple with it. I think people in town hall understand a lot better than we do. I mean, you guys aren't dumb, you know this, what's here. But it's not, in my view, has not been shared or conveyed, or we haven't asked for it.
Well,
Shame on us.
it is coming.
So I'm here asking, can we have that? And I think it's, not for tonight, but I'm making that question known.
Rich Waldo is on it. As I say, he's hired this company, and they're building the whole thing out. All of that.
I'm just saying,
Which
but we're
we
quite a
need,
few
and it's
years into
quite
the
clear.
project, and we're just hearing this now.
Yeah,
in
well,
terms
a
of
couple years
questions.
into it, it's quite clear that we need something like that because it is complex, and yeah, he's working with this company. We will have that. I don't know what his timeline is for it, but it's coming. It's necessary.
And my concern is we're making decisions now and before this each year in a silo again. We've all talked about don't operate in a silo. It's a silo of information. We don't know what we're actually voting for when we vote this year for a $40 million project or a $20 million project because you don't really know the long-term impact. And when you get out 10 years and you realize, oh crap, how did we get here? I would like to know now what I'm planning, what I'm committing to in the future. And if it works fine, and everybody agrees to it, so be it. That's great. I personally don't think we should, but that's my personal opinions. The town has to decide that. And I don't think we're doing that right now. Thanks.
Okay.
But I'm glad he's working on it now. That's great because it's better late than never.
Well, I mean, give Rich some credit. He walked into this, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
and so,
I'm not blaming him at all.
And I think he's doing the right thing. I think that Kim and Mark, everyone that's here and the team knows that we need to project these out, and we did reduce the impact to taxpayers. Over time, we'll start collecting more sewer revenues, which will potentially reduce the impact of the sewer construction and maintenance over time. That's how a normal utility works. You usually borrow taxpayer dollars after it's constructed. Usually do it through fees. So that's the future of it. Right now up front, you're right. It's a little scary, but I think we're getting the numbers. We have these numbers, and I think we're moving in the right direction. I know it feels a little scary, but I think in the next year you'll feel a lot better about once we get Bureau Veritas on and being able to project out capital there, and we have the consultant with the sewer project projecting out and being able to overlay those and then put policy percentages in that we don't exceed or we use in our calculations to structure debt so that we don't impact taxpayers. I think we're going to be in a good place. And then it'll be the decision. We'll present that to taxpayers, to FinCom, to the select board. And you'll have to make a decision if you want to exceed those thresholds or not for these projects or stay on the same trajectory that we're at. As you saw, I think what you're seeing is that Scott and his predecessor did a pretty good job of equalizing or structuring the debt in a way that maintained generally the same debt over time. I mean, it's not been crazy large changes in the debt. We want to maintain that, and we want to ensure that we retain great AAA bond ratings, so we're getting good interest rates on our debt, and we want to structure this in the mind of the taxpayers. We want to make sure we're taking care of the taxpayers. So I think we're doing that. I think
Just
that
want to
within our mind.
clarify my comment, though. And there you go.
No.
This is a town responsibility. I'm not pointing at anybody here. In fact, myself included. I'm saying we.
Yeah.
We. I see this as it's communal effort, and I'm saying I think we've all not done what we should have done, and now we're doing it, which is great. But I just want to be clear that I'm glad it's happening now.
Me too.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I'd like to build on that if I could. I think that it is great, and honestly, Scott, this is tremendous work, and I know how hard it is in the silos. We sort of laugh at this term that we use about the silos, but it's very serious business. And I guess what I would ask is, I think this needs to go on the road like now, what we have, to the decision makers and the people that are grappling with these projects. For example, this kind of information was not on the table for the group that met on March 2nd to discuss some of the final plans on the fire and rescue building. This isn't on the table for the select board, who's putting together decision-making around the whole enchilada, the operational budget, the projects. I mean, this is cumulative. Even the AAA bonding report that we most recent acknowledged that we've expanded tremendously in the last year in terms of staff, in terms of contracts, in terms of commitments. That goes to Chris's point. All of that is on the taxpayer. And you guys know this, but I think that we can't be operating in a vacuum. We need to have people discussing this. They need to be aware of their decision-making, the impact, the financial impact.
That's what we're doing now. Mark, did you want to make a comment?
I just want to address those comments in terms of the need to get this information on the road. I think here is a great place for this information to be shared. And really, in terms of the Fire Rescue Building Committee, their charge is focused on providing support to develop a facility that is needed by the community and needed by the fire rescue department. And so this conversation is really a select board discussion, because they're the ones that are going to be focusing on the debt, the numbers, those components. The building committee is focused on providing a design that meets the needs of the community and the department. And so I just want to be clear on that, and maybe inviting the committee to see the conversation, but it's not necessarily going to drive the committee's decision-making at this point. Right? So I just want to reference that. And then, we've been talking about silos. I can tell you that there are far less silos, especially on the staff level, now than there were when I started only 2.5 years ago. There's a lot more working together. A lot more people know a lot more than you think they do right now. There's a lot more information that is being pushed to the select board on a monthly basis and more than that, right? So I just want to be clear that we are working very diligently outside of silos. Now, silos may still exist, and we know that tends to always happen no matter how hard you try. But we are working very hard to ensure that folks have the information to make decisions.
And let me add one thing here, because you would never say it. We've worked with a number of you the last 3 years, offline as much as in meetings. And the capacity to do what you're talking about is radically better than it was before. I mean, the reason why we're saying, yes, we've added all these people, blah, 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 but it's not people off the street. It's people who can do the work for us. And the reason why we're having these discussions today is because we can have people in the room who can actually articulate answers to the questions we're asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
We're very happy
thank you very much.
Yeah, amen. Thank you very much. Any other, do you have more to say, Scott, or?
No, I think I'm over my time limit.
Oh, I don't think so. I think it's been a terrific education for all of us. Any other questions?
If you walked away with new knowledge, a new understanding, and some concepts that were clear to you, that's grateful for me. That makes me feel I did something good.
Absolutely.
You did, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Good job.
Yeah, that's just terrific. One closing comment that I would like to make, especially for people that might be listening to us after the fact, is that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Division of Local Services, you can very easily pull up a report called Data Analytics, which lists the EQV, outstanding debt, everything you need to know on one chart. You can print out all 351 towns. You can compare towns. I just happened to print out the ones that applied for Orleans. But particularly for some of us people who like to look at those statistics, it's really fun to see who is where with those numbers. Anyway,
Thank you.
that having been said, thank you very much. And Mark, to your point about having the fire committee here, we have Mark Matheson here to talk about the firehouse.
Behind you.
So, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
So, Mark Matheson, welcome. You're in the back there. Yep. Please come up to the microphone.
Scott, could I have copies of your presentation?
Thank you, gentlemen.
We gotta share. It is useful.
Just for the record, we're both on the fire station committee.
Okay. Great, thank you. So, Mark, could you just talk for a minute about perhaps the last March 2nd meeting and some of the decisions that have been made regarding how the fire station is going to be constructed, how it's going to look on the parcel of land? And then I think Scott is going to be talking to us about the tax impact of some of the choices that have been made.
Sure. So actually, the last two committee meetings, back in January, we met with our project manager and with the architects, and we looked at the potential for use of the site for a station. We looked at the potential for a three-story, what was deemed to be a three-story, which actually meant it had a basement to utilize the very low dip in the topography of the existing site. So you could have a garage under in that lower level, and then 2 stories, one ground level, one up above. We looked at a couple of iterations of that. We looked at several iterations of a 2-story, which was everything on the ground level for all the equipment, no basement, and then a second floor for offices and other components of the station. We had extensive conversations on the pluses and minuses of both types of buildings on the site itself, all of the implications of doing one format as opposed to the other. At the end of that meeting, we tasked the architectural firm and project manager to look at one design for a 3-floor building and one design for a 2-floor building, and kind of optimize all of the pluses for either of those, optimize the site location and contingencies for that, and come back to us with that. That's what they did. So at our meeting last week, they presented the 2 potential designs. We looked at all of the work that would need to be done on the site to allow for a 3-story building, and all the work on the site that would need to be done to allow for the 2-story building. We looked at potential for access to the site during construction that might require work on the town-owned land where the entrance to the elementary school is, and how we could separate that, whether it would be, we had some brief discussions on whether it would be just for the construction phase, or whether it would be something that might turn into a permanent setup for non-emergency vehicle access, not main access, but just another way to get to the site. After extensive discussions, the building committee determined that probably what made the most sense for the town would be to proceed with a two-story development of the property. It requires fill, but it put everything on one level. It made the most sense to the chief, and I indicated at the meeting, I think I was one of the people that liked the idea of the three-level, as did Peter Canine on the committee. But when we heard and looked at and discussed all of the requirements for retaining walls and barriers and site modification just to take advantage of that lower dip in the property and a lower level garage, it was more expensive and less useful for the department. So we unanimously agreed on a two-level site and two-level building, and have tasked the architect and the project manager to now go back and do all the work necessary to really confirm everything on the site, to start bringing back hard numbers on site preparation, to look at refining the design and start to really move forward. We're meeting with them again, I think, the 23rd.
Yes.
The 23rd. And there was discussion within the committee as to whether or not, there were a couple of members questioned whether or not we could get this done and have something to present to town meeting. I think the consensus was, yes, we can, that we want to. We think the town really wants to know what's going on with this, and we want to get it going. So we're not going to look at just delaying it to get more information that we don't necessarily need to get to town meeting right now. We're looking at a schematic design now. We're looking to do design and development that would be done during the summer for probably 3 months' worth of work. That would happen after town meeting. And, you know, I mean, don't forget, we have $4.5 million that we're working with now. It's going to get us through the final detailed design, which would probably be done in December or January of next year. So we have the money to do all those things now. That's what the architects, the engineers, and the project manager are working on now, is the finalizing the schematic design. And when that's done, we would have the information we need to go forward with the rest of the design work. We're using estimates now of the cost, and you know that, I mean, you've heard the $59 million number, which is out there. So I think what we're looking at is being able to go to town meeting in May and ask for the ability to borrow for that if necessary. We're not asking for any money. We're not raising any money. And, I mean, you heard Scott's presentation tonight. We're not looking at incurring any debt until probably 31 for that. But we believe that we will have the information that we need, which is where we want to go to the town meeting, and present to the town the options that we have. Obviously, by May town meeting, we'll be much further along. As I said, we're meeting again next week, or 2 weeks of the 23rd. And the process is starting to accelerate. You know, I think the other question that came up, and there was some discussion about it, I guess, at the elementary school meeting on Monday, you know, again, questions about the impact on the elementary school and if we need to do a construction access somewhere along the line there. I did not have a chance to attend the elementary school committee meeting. I am going to meet with the chair of the committee just to reassure her. There's a school committee member on the fire station building committee. And I thought we made it kind of clear that having discussions now about what a driveway looks like is very much too early to have those discussions. That, you know, a year from now, a year and a half from now, we can start looking at how we can access the site for construction, whether we want to work with, obviously, we'll work with the school to ensure that it's a safe pathway for construction vehicles as well as for the elementary parents and students and buses and whatnot, staff. That's a discussion that we have said from day one we will be having with the school committee and their people to make sure that it works for everyone. But that's, you know, we don't need to get bogged down in that discussion now. I think the other germane point would be that we continue to have discussions with other abutters to the town-owned property. As you know, obviously, we were fortunate enough to come to an agreement with the owner of the dentist's office now that has agreed to sell it to the town. This is where the new station is going to be located. We are going to continue to chat with the regional school district. There was, at one point, with the three-level design, we might have needed to have a request to the region for an additional easement across their property by the ball field where the fire station entrance is now. But because we decided to go with a two-level building, we don't need to do that. But, you know, again, we want to keep the communications pathway open with the region. We're looking at the potential again of perhaps the other dentist property that's between the station and the new property that we're purchasing in the elementary school driveway. There's a piece of property there that we don't necessarily need the whole property. It would be nice if we could get an easement there. That way we could have a construction access or a second access to the fire station without impinging on the school way, in any way, shape, or form. But again, you know, as I'm sure you all know, if somebody doesn't want to sell you the property, they don't want to sell it to you. And if somebody has a price range in mind for an abutting piece of property that is above and beyond what the appraised value of that property is, then the town legally can't pay anything that's above the appraised value of the property. So, you know, it's nice to speculate, but, you know, we're trying to deal with the reality here. And the reality for us right now is we have the one dental property that we will have control over in July 1 of 2027. We have the existing fire station property, and we have a plan in the works to build a new fire station on that site that is controlled totally by the town. If something else comes up and it makes it easier for us, then certainly that's the direction we would like to pursue. If it doesn't come up, we're fully capable of doing what we need to do on the property that we now control. So
And
that's kind of where we are.
Okay, Mark, what happens to the old firehouse?
That is going to be taken down. You know, that was another one of the decisions that I think we really discussed that. Again, I was one of the people that had questioned, can we use it? Can it be utilized for something else? The architects and the engineers and the project manager looked at that seriously, and in the course of the discussions that we had back in January, some of the detriments of that were the cost of retrofitting it for anything else, cleaning it out, cleaning it up, and retrofitting it and making it habitable would be extensive. We're still looking at whether there's any way possible that the new station, and maybe even in conjunction with the elementary school, could get onto the sewer line.
Oh, yeah.
And right now, that doesn't look like it's something that can happen. But again, we're still exploring, you know, is there a potential? But we have to deal with the reality of that. Probably is not something that can happen right away. So we need, you know, a septic system in a field, in a place for the septic system, for the new fire station,
Sure.
which, again, makes it difficult to try and hang on to that old station just for the sake of hanging on to it. And the other thing that we were looking at was, and I think Jeff Deering articulated it really well, because I had asked a question about the difference in the three-level design and the two-level design. And the three-level design, in that lower level, that would be a garage area for the non-essential vehicles. We were able to put in much more storage area and workspace down there. Whether that would be valuable for us. And in the price difference between the two-level and the three-level was, a few $1 million. Jeff said, yeah, we need the space now. We need a station that fits for the department right now, the community right now, the needs of the community right now. But we also want to look to the future. And we all know that when you look at fire stations that have been built on the Cape over the last few years, every one of them made cuts here, there, whatever. And, they moved in and they were already short of space when they moved in. So we're trying to avoid that. But one of the things that we're looking at is, with the removal of the old station, is the plans incorporate a storage facility that's roughly like 100 feet by 30 feet. That would be a storage facility that would give the department room to store all the things. They have boats. They have like the lifeguards at Nauset Beach have ATVs. They have those kinds of things that there's no room to store them at DPW, but they can be at the fire station. And there's emergency equipment that can be at the fire station, the generators that they have, the light systems that they have. So we're looking at that as an alternative where you could have a storage system on the property in that space. So that's being incorporated into the plans as well, which, again, to go back to your question about, why we decided that the old building really wasn't worth trying to save, that the pluses really didn't outweigh the negatives of it, and that it gave us the option to do the things that need to be done. In reality, it is a very small site. And one of the things that is going to be required is zoning relief. I mean, we've talked about this openly. The station is going to be built on town-owned and controlled land, but it might be a foot away from the boundary, 25 feet away from the boundary. You need to have parking for the public. You need to have parking for the firefighters. You need to have access to the building. And so it's a very small site, and we're trying to maximize the use of that site to the best way that we possibly can. So again, having the old building sitting in the middle of it really made it difficult to incorporate the things that we needed to have for the station to function. So that's kind of where we are.
Excellent. Questions?
Mark, the two-story, at least conceptually, does the first floor allow for like all the critical apparatus to be on the first floor?
Yes, so if you go, and I would encourage, in lieu of the discussion you were having earlier and the point that Alice brought up about, informing the public and stuff, I think that you can go online to the town's website and you can look at, the meetings. The Fire Rescue Committee meeting from, I think it was January 12th, and from March 2nd, 3rd, 2nd. Those two meetings, you can see from the January meeting the 5 different potentials and see what was there and the pluses and minuses of the different designs for 2- and 3-story things. Then you can look at the last meeting, what we settled on. And again, these are conceptual. This is nothing's cast in bronze, but all of the emergency vehicles would be in the front corner of the building, directly accessible to Eldridge Parkway. So you would have your 3 bays for your large firefighting apparatus and engines, ladder truck and whatnot, 2 bays for the ambulances, And then at the back of the building, on that same level, would be garage access that would go out the back and have to come around. But those would be the non-essential vehicles, like the brush breaker that's not used all the time, or the emergency pickup truck that tows the rescue boat or whatever. So, and that's all on that same level, which, again, the chief, talked about having all the vehicles on the same level so that you could contain the exhaust, you could contain the contaminants, you could have maintenance on the vehicles, all on that same level, which was a benefit, as opposed to having them on two separate levels.
Tony?
Mark, I'm not sure where you can find that. I've looked for the minutes, and I haven't found anything.
Yeah, I mean, I review, I'll tell you, I reviewed this morning both meetings. I go online to the Town of Orleans website, you go to the page that's, Mark, you can tell me.
Yeah, so I just pulled it up just to make sure it's all there. So on the main page, when you go to the town website, on the very top, it says Fire Rescue Station. That's where you click in, brings you right to the information page for Fire
I
Rescue.
went to the minutes, I'm sorry. I
And
went to the wrong
then-
spot.
Sure, and then when you go to, if you click on the Fire Rescue Building Committee page, at the bottom, there's specifically, each meeting is listed in a synopsis of what happened at those meetings, the major points that happened, with the videos and the presentation links right there. So everything is there for you, all the information and the videos are there.
When you go to the video, it's the big screen that's up there on the wall behind us that has the clear
Yeah.
renditions of the stations and the potential.
I'm
As I
sorry.
said-
I was charged with telling them about it, and I keep going to the minutes, and I never found anything, so my mistake.
Yeah, not a problem, but again, you can see the diagrams, you can see, but I continue to remind people, this was the first pass. This is, we were looking at potential for 3-story, 2-story, how it would work, and you start out with what are the needs for all different aspects of the fire rescue community. What are the needs? How do you fit them into a building? And so this was just the first pass of how you can fit them in there. It's not the final design. It's not by any means a finalized version, but it gives you a really good picture of what it looks like, what the station would look like, interior-wise.
Yeah, Mark, I watched the March 3rd meeting. It was very informative, and I thought the fellow did a good job. If we could just just a couple of questions I have in regards to sort of projections around financial implications, okay? He gave figures for the hard costs of those two designs, and the 2-story hard cost figures were what?
Hang on a second.
I'll tell you.
2-story hard cost was $47,675,000. The 3-story was $61,133,000.
Great, those were the figures I had as well, so
Yeah, and it
thanks
was-
for clarifying. I think I.
Yeah, the first one was about $1,250 a square foot.
Yeah,
And
so
the
there,
3-story one was about $1,370.
And then the soft
And so-
costs were 25 to 30%.
Soft costs, yeah, we're not including that, they were an extra 25 to 30%.
yeah, and I remember that, and that's sort of standard practice in the industry, right? 30%. So one of the questions that I had is, does any of that include the demolition costs for the other building? What are we thinking about for that? And are we projecting, has the committee discussed anything about the soft costs?
That's coming up, we had to make the determination on what the site was gonna look like, whether we were gonna continue to have multi-level site or just a level site. So now that we've decided that the 2-story with a flat level site, now we can refine the costs on all those other things.
Okay.
Would- I
and
would
then
add,
and
I'm
another-
sorry,
Yeah,
just to answer your question, Alice, just looked up in the presentation that we had been received that was given to the cost estimators to come up with those numbers, and demolition was included in the existing conditions in terms of estimating costs.
so it's rolled into those hard costs?
In that, what was submitted to the cost estimator, that was included.
Okay, great, because he didn't mention that, so thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, there was,
Mark.
at the beginning, I'm sorry, at the beginning of that presentation, there was a bunch of items listed that he didn't necessarily dive into, but they're in the.
Thanks a
you can-
lot.
You can see that on the webpage as well.
Okay, I couldn't go back and the last question was, you know, this is a thorny issue, but are we anticipating any EPA cleanup necessary on that site anywhere for use for public? Has anybody talked about that?
The geotechnical review has just started last week.
And
We
they'll
don't know
take-
yet.
But they typically will be taking soil samples and things, because that can be a thorny issue that comes out of the blue, as I think we found with another property in town, right? We want to be sure we know what's happening.
Yeah, we will know in the next few weeks.
Okay, thank you.
David?
So just to follow up on that, and, you know, in the interest of succeeding at the vote, do you have any concerns for unknowns like that, sort of causing doubt in people when they're coming in to vote in May? You know, because you heard last week, I think it was last week, was it Scott who got up and talked about you need 17,000 cubic yards, you got to buy the land, and, you know, and those may, I don't know how valid that is or not, but how much of those unknowns do you think may be resolved well in advance of the meeting, rather, as opposed to like the last second?
Yeah, and that's where we are right now. Those are things that, you know, when they come in on the 23rd, we'll have more of those answers, and they will continue, you know, the committee will, we had months between meetings because it was so much preliminary work needed to get done.
Right.
Now we're looking at meetings much more frequently, you know, every couple of weeks or whatever. As things get done, they come in and report to the committee will report to the select board, to the finance committee, to whomever. But we see a timetable of much more frequent information being delivered to the town, and all those questions would be answered. Because we want to have all those answers before we go to town meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Mark?
I would add to that to say that, you know, I sit in the weekly meetings with the team, and it's incredible how competent they are and the teams that they're working with and the engineering side. A lot of the questions that were raised at the past select board meeting from the public are pretty much answered internally. They're just trying to pull all the pieces together so that when there is a public presentation, it's complete. And so I think from my perspective, I'm pretty confident that a lot of the unknowns are going to be unearthed before we get to town meeting, and really much before that. We're ramping up to have conversations with the public, you know, in this month. So
Okay, good.
starting that it seems as though maybe we're not ready, but we're feeling pretty confident about it.
Great. Any other questions? Well, Mark, thanks so much for coming. Thanks for waiting. I hope it was
Thank you both.
Yep.
very informational for us.
You know, I'm glad that we were able to do this, and we had a discussion at the fire building committee meeting last week where, you know, we talked about getting the message out to the public, making sure that the public, the taxpayers, the citizens in the town were as well-informed as possible, and how we can do that, you know, and there were a couple of members of the committee that felt it was the obligation of the committee to be doing that. I think we had some good discussion about what the charge of the committee is. And then the publicity portion that needs to be ramped up here, and that's within, you know, the town hall, within the office of the communications people from the town manager's office. The committee, I think David Little and Peter Canine have volunteered to kind of be involved in that, you know, to get the message out so that everybody knows. And you know, I think, as you alluded to earlier, when Scott was here, that the staff that's in the town hall now has just really begun to develop and create and produce the ability to communicate with the public. And they're you know, getting ramped up for this, that the information's gonna be out there. We're trying to get as much out as we can. We wanna make sure that it's accurate and that it's clearly understood. But you know, I made the statement about, gee, we started on a sewer system a few years ago. And I had people coming up to me saying, oh my God, what's going on? I mean, they watched huge machines come down their street and dig huge trenches in their street and put pipes in there and fill them in and pave them and then dig it up again and, you know, after it's settled and pave it again or whatever. And they said to me, what do you mean I have to hook up to the sewer? Where'd the sewer come from?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can put it out there as much as you
I know.
possibly can put it out there, and if somebody's just tuning it out, I don't know what else you can do. So we're trying to really make sure that the people in town know and understand what's happening with the fire station, and when we have, you know, some of the heat we got was, oh, it's been months, we haven't heard anything, we haven't heard, I'm like, yeah. So much preliminary stuff had to be done. Now we're at the point where we have real things that we can put out to people, and it starts with those meetings, and if you watch those, you see all the diagrams, the pictures, the numbers. You go on the page, as Mark said, it's all there now, we're gonna just keep going forward.
Right. Anyway, thanks so much for coming, Mark. That's a great explanation. Thank you. Thank you to both Marks.
Took that as both.
So Tim, you're next. So it's perfect timing.
Best for last, right?
Well,
Okay.
what you have to talk about gives context to all this preceding information.
Unfortunately, I only made 8 copies. I'm going to hand that out and talk to it, and then I have my warrant article to talk to also.
I think we can copies.
So, my name's Tim Cunahan. I came to this topic while I was on the Finance Committee, right? So, to some of you who I spent 3 years with, you've heard some of my discussion of the residential tax exemption. But after I got off of the Finance Committee, I went on to the Long Range Capital Planning Committee for a year, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But during that time, I sort of extended my thoughts on the importance and the place that the residential tax exemption can fit in with what's happening with all the capital projects that we have going on in town. So this first handout that I've given you shows 2 pieces here, which were modeled by the Long Range Capital Planning Committee. One is sewer debt, and you can see that growing from basically $2 million worth of service to, I don't know, $7.5 million a year of service. And then the capital improvement projects, these were loaded in just based on what was in the 5-year CIP. Again, this was all done in 2024, so this is old data. But that gets up to about $11 million a year of debt service. And these both go on top of what was our existing $7 million a year at that point in time. I think it's up to 8 or 9, steady state debt now. So as I thought about this, we're basically adding $18 million worth of debt on top of the 7 that we had at that point in time. And from a financial planning perspective, I saw that as being a very heavy lift. And I think that, it's, so there are 2 things that I'm advocating for in the warrant article. I've submitted a citizen's petition, and I'll hand that out in a second, that talk to the need, what I still perceive as a strong need for a long-range capital plan. And the one we were working on went out 20 years. So I applaud the work that Scott has done that gets you out 5 years. But with all of the stuff that we've got going on, I think we really need to be thinking out 20 years. I'm going to take a little bit of an exception to what Nick said about not being able to plan all this stuff or model it all. I think you actually can. I wouldn't model it in the same level of detail, obviously, that Scott's going to do, because he's going to get down to the penny. At an aggregate level, I think it's not that difficult to do a 20-year capital plan. And in every business that I've ever been in, I was required to do a 5 to 10 year plan, right? It was a requirement. If I didn't have one, my business was not approved, right? You were thrown out of the room. So, and I think that the town tends to take an approach that is much more, we look at the expenses, we add them up, we say we're going to spend them all, and then we say, oh, well, we're going to go get the revenues from the taxpayer, right? So, and I don't think that's the right approach, right? I think that revenues and expenses go hand in hand, and that you need to be thinking about both of them over a significant period of time, looking out into the future. And if you're not doing good financial planning, right? And so I think we really need to move towards something that really shows taxpayers what the impact of all these projects are going to be over, the next 20 years at the tax rate. And I think that modeling that is possible. So, and that's where I was going with the work that we were doing on the Long Range Capital Planning Committee. I did get hung up on some of the sewer issues, which I think are still loosey-goosey. The issue of betterments, when you're piping downtown with high density, and maybe even, the Meeting House Pond area is a little less dense, but once you get out in the other parts of town, the per household cost gets much higher, right? So, and you also, from a rate perspective, you're putting a lot more capital in, and the amount of water flow you're going to get from those incremental phases is going to be a lot less. So I'm actually working with Rich Waldo. I'm on the Water and Sewer Committee, and I'm working with him on the Waterworth project to model all of this. But I'm really concerned about the continued use of the short-term rental tax as a subsidy into the operating costs of the water plant. I'm worried about the betterments and whether or not I don't think we're going to be able to get 20% in betterments as we move further out, and I'm worried about rates, right? So I'm very worried about whether or not we're going to be able to set the rates at a level that is affordable also, right? To Chris's point, these are all costs to people who live in town. It's not, people tend to push stuff off into these other pockets and make believe that it isn't a cost to the citizen of the town. They're cost to the citizens of town, and we need to consider that.
So Tim, the residential tax exemption,
Yes.
you want to explain what that is?
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
some of us know what it is. I think some of us have no clue
Okay.
how that works.
Yeah, so.
Obviously in context with the Warren article that you're.
Right.
working on.
I developed a lot of this while I was on this committee. The residential tax exemption in Massachusetts allows you, and for resort communities, to take between 0 and 50% of the average assessed value and give that to permanent residents as an exemption on their property taxes. So, for example, if, as Scott said, the average assessed value is about $1.4 million now. If we had a 25% residential exemption, that would be $350,000. Let me see if I've done my math right. Yes, $350,000 that you would be able to take off of that. It's much easier back when we were closer to $1 million. But it basically it gives an exemption to permanent residents. And personally, I believe that we owe an obligation to our permanent residents at a much higher level than we have an obligation to our second homeowners.
So, Tim, in there, explain, if you're taking that amount of money off a certain class, then where are you making up the money for
Right,
the tax?
so what happens is the overall tax rate the marginal tax rate goes up to absorb that, right? So if we're at 611 now, I'm not sure what it is, the overall tax rate would go up, and half of the people in town, half of us are permanent residents and half are second homeowners, half of the people would be able to take a deduction, and the other half would be paying a higher tax rate. The program is revenue neutral, right? So you can't raise revenues through this. The tax rate adjusts to accommodate the amount of exemptions that you're giving to the people in town.
I'm sorry, what percentage are you proposing in your?
So I'm actually not even proposing a percentage. What I want to do is I want to get the select board to begin the process of implementing this, right? So it takes, so there are a couple of things that go on, right? Brad Highnote has to go and get new software, right, that he's got to implement. And he's got to be able to start taking applications. And then in the first year, you have to take a large overlay because you don't know how many other people are going to be submitting applications. And the overlay serves to basically allow people abatements against their tax bill, right? So if somebody came in after the exemption was put in place but didn't get their application in, he wouldn't necessarily see them. Therefore, they could say, I'm a permanent resident, they prove it, and they could get an abatement for that. So by going early, you can avoid the issue around a large overlay budget that has to be voted in. And you also allow for it to be integrated into your planning process. So in the earliest discussions that I had with the committee here, which I presented, I attempted to create a model that offset significant increases like the fire station, right, which I'm estimating is going to be about, I think Scott had it at about $700 for average household. I wanted to put an exemption, a real residential exemption in place that would effectively keep the tax rate constant for a permanent resident, right, at the average assessed value. So even though, so they wouldn't see that $750 or $700 increase in their tax bill, that amount would actually get passed on to the second homeowners. And I have a spreadsheet where you can actually calculate, for how much capital, what's the trade-off in terms of how much you have to put into the residential exemption to keep it taxpayer neutral at the average assessed value for a permanent resident. So, okay, so so I showed you the chart. A couple of comments on just equity. The middle-class people have the vast majority of their wealth in their home, right? Wealthy people have much more of their wealth in stocks and bonds and investments. So when you look at property taxes, let's say you have a 20% mortgage, right? You're just for simplicity purposes, you're paying 1% of your property tax. We're at 0.6% right now, but up around Boston, it's closer to a point or a point and a half. That means that they're paying a 5% wealth tax on their equity in their house, right? I mean, think about that. That's a huge wealth tax, right? Now, granted, you get services in the local community for that, but it's an incredibly regressive tax when you look at it on its impact on especially this 30% of households that are, household poor, or I'm not sure, what was the term used?
The household burden.
Household burden, yeah. So I think, we need to be thinking about the fact that we live in a rural community, and for people that grew up here, they don't have the same income levels or the same levels of wealth that all these second homeowners who have moved down, myself included, who have moved down here and bought up and bid up the pricing of the houses in town. We need to be thinking about that part of the community because they're our workforce, right? They're the people that are, hopefully teachers will be able to afford to live here, and firemen and policemen and all of that, the people that actually, provide services to us. So I'm thinking about how to try to keep it affordable for them at the income levels that they have that are significantly below the income levels of those of us who were fortunate enough to move down here later on. So anyways, I'm going to, so if you want a detailed look at the residential exemption, I'd recommend you look at Brad Hinote's presentation. I don't know the date of it, but he gave a very good explanation
Right.
of it.
Yeah.
And-
Look it up.
Can I just ask one question, just to clarify again? Because in these discussions, we often talk about second homeowners, non-residents, but a significant part of the burden, the way it was written before, falls on year-round residents, permanent residents as well. And I don't know what the percentage was. It was 10% or 8% or whatever. I'm just asking.
So you're saying what, right,
There's a
so
percentage
there is a
that is-
cutover point above a certain assessed value
Right.
where people would actually wind up paying more, right? And that cutoff point is typically about twice the average assessed value. So if the average assessed value is $1.4 million, it would be at 2.8. So, and in the statistics I got from Brad Hinote, he said that there were only 8% of the permanent residents that fell into that category of owning houses that were assessed for over $2.8 million.
So I wanted to make the case because just the point, because there's 3 widows in my neighborhood living in a house on a fixed income from their husband who died years ago that have been there since the 70s that will probably be over that limit. So I'm just, and don't have any more capacity.
That's a pretty nice house.
It is, and I'm not saying it isn't, but it is.
And they could get a mortgage on it, right? I mean, I'm assuming that they probably own it.
Mean. That's very mean-spirited.
Going in the wrong direction.
Anyway,
with that, sir.
I'm just asking,
Hey,
I'm just making sure.
You got a
it's-
$3 million house and
And only so much money, if you're living on a pension. So
And you can only borrow so much.
So I'm just asking.
Yes, and I'm a retiree and I have actually taken out a mortgage, so it can be done. It's not that difficult.
But it's still written that way, so when I get asked, it's still written that those people will be not just paying a full tax, but they're going to be absorbing some of the burden.
Yep.
Paying higher taxes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but it tends to be marginal because, again, that's the crossover point, so they may pay, depending, if a $3 million house might pay another $200 or $300 a year, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And any other questions about the residential tax exemption?
No, I want to pass out mine.
Okay, good. And Ed, by all means.
I'll wait till Tim passes out.
Oops.
So I also, to amplify this a little bit, I did read the credit rating report, right, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And it really does, it constantly refers to us as being a wealthy community, right? Think about that. They must use the term wealthy community in here a dozen times.
But Tim, if you go to the DLS website, and it articulates exactly why we are wealthy. I think if you look at that, if you look at the towns on Barnstable County, we are the second wealthiest community. Mark, I see you're agreeing with me. I think only Chatham has higher income report, and this is from our income tax reporting that they get these statistics.
Okay?
So, this is a reason, for example, we have lost out on a number of grants. The fire station grant, the library grant.
But there are 30% of the town that is housing burdened, right? I mean,
But that's different. Income is different than, the income stream is different than, as you say, so much value is in our residential real estate.
right.
Anyway, Ed,
I think one demographic group that probably needs a lot of, that could benefit from property tax relief would be renters. But as I understand it, landlords cannot apply and get an exemption.
Yeah, so Provincetown actually has implemented a separate rule, and I'm not sure what it's called, but they do allow for properties that are being rented to permanent residents, year-round residents, for the owner to take advantage of the residential exemption.
Is that contemplated in this article?
I have not addressed that. I think that's something that, I'm just trying to set the stage, right? I'm looking at these projects like the fire station and the library and the continuing debt that we're associating with the sewers, and I'm trying to get us ready to be able to do something to accommodate the impact of that on the people that live here full-time, right? So that's my goal. I'm not recommending a percentage, right? In the warrant article, I say I recommend a nominal, I think 5%. I'd even advocate for 0% in the first year, just to get the project off the ground.
It just seems that, it seems administratively burdensome to the assessor, and it's a burden that he must, or the assessor must go through annually because it's.
No, it's a startup. Brad has, it's about $30,000, right? It's to buy the software and for the overtime for him to process people.
okay. Mark?
Just Mark Reel, Assistant Town Manager. Just to Ed's question, in November at our special town meeting, we passed Article 4, which was the acceptance of the local option for affordable housing tax exemption for year-round rental properties, which allows
thank you.
a homeowner to receive a tax exemption for renting to year-round resident. So we've done that.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Great, thank
So
you.
that's the landlord gets it.
Correct. The landlord gets it to
Whether it's passed
incentivize,
through
well,
is
the
up
idea, I'm sorry, the idea is to incentivize year-round rental housing.
Right.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
That was a real smart move. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I-
Can I ask a question while Mark is there?
Yes.
Mike?
No, please.
Yeah, I just lost track of this issue because we talked about this months ago, and I was one of the people who supported it, and I know we had the presentation, and I know it's up to the select board to decide. I didn't vote.
No, but the select board did. It was
Oh.
1-4.
That's my
For this
question.
Right, they voted against it.
Okay,
For
that was my
implementation.
question. I did not know that. That's why I'm
Yeah,
asking where
and
this
to that
stands.
point, Tim has met with myself and Kevin, and we've talked about when the board, if the board does decide to implement a residential exemption, we will obviously be putting forth the budget funds necessary to implement that. So just want you to be clear on that.
Yeah,
Was there any
so-
question about this article being valid? I just want to understand what the dynamics of how the structure of this works
Sure.
technically.
We had a preliminary review last week by town council who deemed, there's 2 citizens petitions, both were deemed out of order. And next week, she will be at the select board meeting to discuss the warrant as a whole, and we'll give more detail to the select board at that time.
Yeah, so the warrant article, as I wrote it, is simply a recommendation to the select board to, one, implement a long-range capital plan, right, that shows the taxpayer what the impact of all these capital projects is going to be on their tax rate, right? And I think that, I would hope that all of you would be in agreement that we should have a long-range capital plan. And then the second part is to encourage the select board to vote in favor of a nominal residential tax. Now, again, it's their decision, right?
Right.
This is not a town meeting decision. This is a decision that is solely owned by the select board. And so I had a similar warrant article last year, and I think it was about 60% to two-thirds of the people voted in favor of it, even though it was also considered out of order. I think that the people in the town, the voters, want this, and I think that I'm not sure. I mean, I have a good buddy from college that has a $3 million house in Chatham, and I get into arguments with him about, why are you against this? This is going to cost you a couple $1,000s a year, and you can easily afford that. And you look at what's happening to Chatham. I mean, the workforce is carved out. There aren't any locals around anymore. They're all moving to Dennis or Yarmouth or I mean, half of our workforce comes in from off the Cape, right? I mean, this is to try to stop a trend that is going to overwhelm this town the same way it has overwhelmed P-Town and Nantucket and all these other places.
Yeah, I just have a process question, because I'm not sure what we're doing, where we stand with this, Mark. So you're saying that the attorney won't accept this to go as an article for town meeting, or is there going to be some help to ensure that it can?
No, the article will it's required that the article will be on the town meeting warrant. But the review of what this article does essentially says the article is out of order because it goes against the charter. So there's components of it that are directing people or boards to do something. It's not town meeting's purview, so it would be considered out of order.
So how can that be remedied so that it isn't out of order? Because the warrant articles have not been fully accepted. No, can this be?
The article
rewritten?
cannot be changed at this point.
It can't be.
Because the warrant was closed, and so the petitioners, all of the petitioners have signed this petition based on the language that's presented, and that was submitted before the warrant closed, and so therefore, that exact language has to go to town meeting as written.
I see.
Not even the submitter can change the language or ask for it to be removed.
Okay, so it got in before it closed, but it
Yes.
was inaccurate, and there was no mechanism to address that in order to ensure that it could go forward.
And
Is that
just
what
a-
I'm understanding?
As a point of note, last year I requested that I get legal review for my citizens petition, and I was denied it. So I did not expect this year that I would be able to get access to legal review. So the whole
There
process.
was a change in process this year, and if there was a citizen interested in having their article reviewed by legal counsel for form, et cetera, not for the content essentially, it was a request to the select board, and that's how the process would go. We didn't receive any of those requests.
And was that, with all due respect, was that publicized so that petitioners?
It's in the process of, in the citizen's petition process. It's
It
on the
says they
website.
can ask.
Correct. You can ask for assistance to the
But
select
you
board.
said, and just to be clear, you said that has changed. That's a
That
new
is
piece.
this year's, very clearly, we wanted to lay that out.
Okay.
In the policy that's been addressed by the select board.
The policy changed.
Yeah, so it's missed opportunity, as we say in the business, right?
So it's getting late. Any other questions?
I have a question. This is probably easy. You talked about one of the costs that people stumble on is the overlay, right?
Yes.
But if we phase this in at a low percentage and crank it up, surely the pipeline will build without without minimal extra cost.
Exactly. And that's why I'm trying to preemptively get this passed and to get the select board to get Brad Heinold engaged,
Yeah.
so that in 2028 or 29, when we start to see more of the debt from the sewers and the fire station hitting us, that they can crank it up.
Yes.
Right? I mean, this is trying to set the stage to be able to take advantage of a tool which the select board have to manage affordability in town.
You know, to Chris's comment, I would like to make a pitch in what you're doing, Tim, that it really should go to all of the year-round residents. It should not be, the cap should not be the value of the real estate, because there are so many of the elderly people here who are living all along the waterfront. They might have bought that property, inherited the properties when they were $25,000, $35,000. Now they're at $3 million. And they are not, if you're 75, 85, you're not going out and getting a mortgage for it. You're just looking at, boom, your taxes going up. So I think it should be somehow defining what is a year-round resident, not necessarily by the value of the real estate.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm abiding by mass law, right?
Yeah,
I
fair
mean,
enough.
mass law for the residential exemption says this is the way it works, and I can't change that.
David?
I hear you, though.
I was just saying you can't do it, like he's right.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't like it.
If you were Queen Elaine, we would do it.
You gotta remember, go back and look at the numbers and see what the incremental increase is. It isn't like their taxes are doubling. It's
Right.
going
No,
up
I
a
know.
little bit. I don't wanna debate it tonight. I'm just saying, you gotta educate yourself on how it actually works.
Incidentally, if you want to hear these arguments in print, old arguments in print, just pick up the Chronicle today. Because Chatham is having the same exact discussion a year after they had it already, you know?
When will the select board be looking at this particular article again? At what meeting?
Every meeting from now until April 1st.
Yeah.
That's their last meeting. They'll discuss warrant articles, but next week and then the week after. So Karis North, who's our town council, will be at next week's meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been talking to Kevin, and he had invited me to next week's. I can't do that one, so I'm going to go for the week after.
Sure. Yeah, and they'll discuss it, and then you can come in the next week, yeah.
Okay. Dick, do you have a question?
It's not a question, it's just a comment, and it's that this certainly would be a reallocation of the tax burden, and it would alleviate it for the residents, or a large number of the residents, not all. But it will not change the process of making it unaffordable to live here. When you have an average cost for a house of over $1.4 million, there's no way that this is going to impact the ability for low-wage or even middle-wage earners to set up residence in Orleans. And that trend is not going to be changed by this, and I'm not sure what it's going to be changed by, if anything.
Yeah, so to that point, and that's a valid point, I think a lot of the housing proposals that are being made by the Affordable Housing Committee and those
Friends will have some
are looking
ownership.
at denser housing, smaller, in the downtown, that might be $600,000, right? Which starts to be in more of an affordable range, $500,000 or to, what do the condos downtown sell for? I think they're down around that. And those people are the ones that would get a very good discount, because if you take half of, let's say we do 25% again, $350,000 of value off of a $500,000 property, you're only paying property taxes on that $150,000, right? So it makes it very affordable for people at the low end of the valuation.
May I just say that, as far as I have seen so far, that kind of housing has not been proven to be financially capable of being done without subsidization. And this town, I do not think, is in a position to subsidize a meaningful portion of the population's housing.
My conversations with Alan McLennan would indicate that he thinks that housing can be built at that kind of a price per unit
And
without
some of
subsidy.
some of the Governor Prince development is scheduled to be home ownership units that will be in that,
Yes, but that whole thing has been subsidized.
not the Governor Prince.
But Dick, I
Governor Pence was subsidized. The town bought the land.
You're correct about that
Land
stuff.
purchase
But
was.
just, I think what he's, part of what he's saying is to keep in mind that there's a lot of condominiums, and a lot of them are retired folks on fixed incomes. They don't have $3 million homes, they have $300,000 condos, and there's quite a few of them.
There are.
And I think, it's not just the young people, because, it's like, you're trying to do a lot of different things to try to move the needle a little bit for the housing problem we have here. And one of them, this is just one of them. And so it's not just the young folks, which is a crisis, but it's also the older folks, again, on fixed incomes, who, that makes a big deal if they save $500 or $1,000 on their tax bill.
I understand that.
So I think, it is a transfer of wealth. And I think it's something the town needs to keep in mind we're going to need if we're going to have a vibrant town going forward.
Anyhow.
Okay?
Thank you.
Tim, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your
Tim,
comments.
thank you.
Thank you. We don't have minutes for March 4th. Chris?
You don't.
That's right.
I did.
Your job, Chris.
I did try to get the AI to work for me, and I did get it to work today, but not in time to send you all
But, okay,
copies of minutes.
so you will be doing it.
But I will.
If you learn how to use AI to do it, please teach me.
Okay.
Okay, and next up on the alphabetical list, Ed, you're next to tonight's minutes.
Do what?
Tonight's minutes.
Tonight's?
Yeah, you know, it's an
Yeah, you were
alphabetical
recording
list we
this,
have
weren't you?
here.
Yeah, I'll do it in 30 seconds.
Just want to point that out. And
Recording it.
I do, it's running late, so I'm going to talk quickly about a couple of things that we have learned over the past.
Elaine, just, do you want to approve the February 12th minutes?
Last week.
No, because they're not on the agenda.
Oh, they weren't?
No.
Oh, okay. Sent them out.
They're not on the agenda.
Oh, okay,
Next time.
okay, no problem, no problem.
But they're ready to go for somebody who asks.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of yesterday, Nick and I were at the, gentlemen, were at the chairs meeting. A couple of things I want to say very quickly. The transfer station, you may all know, is waiving fees for the acceptance of residential brush through March 24th. That's a financial loss to the town, but certainly a great gift to people that have a lot of brush.
I heard it got pushed to April 10th.
Did they, yesterday, we were told March 24th.
I think we
Auto.
extended it again.
Anyway, get it out there. We also have updated amount of free cash that has been certified, which is $4.265 million. We already heard the fire rescue, OpenGov is absolutely going to be completed by May town meeting. But something else I should have, Mark, you sent out the other day, and I asked you to print, but should that be not printed because there's going to be edits to it?
So, what you received the other day, there's a couple of minor edits that don't change the bottom line number. There's just some shifts and adjustments. So, I did respond to that email and asked Molly to wait for tomorrow to print.
Fine.
So
But she's out
tomorrow, we'll send the digital version again out.
Okay.
And highlight where those changes were, but
Okay,
they're very
fine.
minor changes.
So she's out tomorrow, so it would be fair for me to say for anybody to come in Tuesday morning and pick up a copy
Yes.
from the town manager's office, okay?
Town manager's office?
Yeah, I would say town manager's office, right? Okay?
Yes.
I'm not going to report on any of these other things. Phase 2, by the way, was completed as of March 11th, which means anybody that's in Phase 2 gets to start hooking up.
As soon as they get the letter.
As soon as the letters will be going out immediately.
And the post office is to do the job.
Does anybody else have liaison reports? 1, 2, 3, 4?
No.
I do want to point out that we have a joint public hearing next Wednesday night. They have not yet announced the time that that joint public hearing will be. The select board's meeting is from 5 to 7. He's thinking. Then we have our regularly scheduled meetings on March 26th, and we will be working with the budget, and on that budget that you will be picking up on Tuesday is a list of the warrant articles that we will be voting on at town meeting. So there's a lot of meaty things that we'll be working on March 26th. Then, depending on how far we get with those articles, we may need to have a second meeting on April 2nd which is here at 7 o'clock, if we may not need it, but we have to have all of our votes completed on April 3rd, hence needing the April 2nd meeting. So it depends on how quickly we get through those.
How many articles are there?
I think it's 35, so,
And that's not, there are 11 consent articles,
Right.
right?
Yeah, so controversial would be a dozen, maybe?
I don't think that at all. I mean, the fire will be the contentious thing.
Yeah, the one that'll take 3 hours.
Right.
So April 2, you're thinking is a possibility.
Yeah.
Not with the new 1-minute time limit.
That includes.
Did we do that?
Thinking.
No, I'm just kidding.
We should have that.
Joint.
Yeah, yeah. That's gonna be, at what time? I have that joint meeting at 4 o'clock for some reason. Is that correct or no?
That's why I'm asking Mark to,
I thought it's supposed to be 5:45, but I can't seem to find the.
It used to be a separate,
okay?
different to the regular.
It's gonna be on that agenda tomorrow, though.
It'll be on the select board agenda. I will send a note out so we all know exactly what time that will be. Having discussed that, no liaison reports, I would entertain a
I
motion.
move we adjourned.
Second, yeah, we're all second.
We're all adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.